On May 14, 1985, a group of teenage girls showed up at Ruth Pelke's home in Gary, Indiana, with plans of robbing the elderly Bible school teacher. 3 of the girls entered the home under the pretense of wanting Bible lessons, while the 4th waited outside as a lookout. One of the girls grabbed a vase and hit Pelke over the head. As she fell to the floor, another girl, 15-year-old Paula Cooper, took a butcher knife out of her purse and proceeded to stab the woman to death. In total, she stabbed Pelke 33 times.
Paula Cooper's 3 accomplices were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 25 to 60 years. But Cooper, who confessed to Pelke's slaying, was convicted of murder and sentenced to death by electric chair. At the age of 16, she became the youngest person on death row. Paula herself was the victim of child abuse and attended 10 different schools by the time of her arrest.
Paula Cooper's case galvanized human rights activists and death penalty opponents around the world. Her supporters included Pope John Paul II and the victim's grandson, Bill Pelke. In 1993, Pelke helped organize a journey of hope to spread his message of, quote, hope in the power of forgiveness and hope in the possibility of a world without violence. He spoke out against the death penalty to anyone who would listen and arranged educational events at schools, universities, and religious groups. He partnered with renowned anti-death penalty activist Sister Helen Prejean to plead for clemency for Paula Cooper.
In 1989, Paula Cooper's sentence was commuted to 60 years. However, she was released early for good behavior and after earning a college degree behind bars. Now, after nearly 30 years in prison, Paula Cooper has been given a second chance at her life. Shortly before being released this week, she told the Times of Northwest Indiana she looks forward to starting life afresh.
Well, when I get out, I don't care if I have to sweep floors, wash dishes, or flip hamburgers. I'm going to take whatever I can get, just to get on my feet and show people that I deserve a chance.
Explain this case and why you got so involved coming out on behalf of Paula Cooper, the woman, the teenager who killed your grandmother, Bill.
Well, it was about 1.5 years after my grandmother's death, about 3.5 months after Paula Cooper had been sentenced to death, where I became convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that my grandmother would have been appalled by the fact that this girl was on death row and there was so much hate and anger towards her. I was convinced she would have had love for Paula Cooper and her family. I felt she wanted some of my family to have that same sort of love and compassion. I felt like it fell on my shoulders. I didn't have any love and compassion, but so convinced that's what my grandmother would have wanted. In tears, I begged God to please, please, please give me love and compassion for Paula Cooper and to do it on behalf of my grandmother. And I prayed it in Jesus' name. And it was just a short prayer, but I began to think, well, I could write the girl a letter. I could tell her about my grandmother, share my grandmother's faith. And I realized that prayer of love and compassion had been answered because I knew I no longer wanted her to die and I wanted to do whatever I could do to try to help her. And I learned the most important lesson of my life that night, and it was about the healing power of forgiveness. Because when my heart was touched with compassion, the forgiveness became automatic. And when it happened, it brought a tremendous healing. It had been 1.5 years since my grandmother's death, and whenever I thought about my grandmother during that period of time, I pictured her butchered on the dining room floor where our family went for Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and happy, joyous occasions. It was too painful to even think about. But I knew immediately when my heart was touched with that compassion and forgiveness took place, I knew from that moment on, whenever I would think about my grandmother again, I would no longer picture how she died, but I would picture how she lived, what she stood for, what she believed in, the beautiful, wonderful person she was. And I knew it wasn't something that happened just so I'd feel good for a period of time, but it was something to be shared with other people. And that night, I made God 2 promises. One is any success that came into my life as a result of forgiving her, I'd give God the honor and glory because it wasn't something I had done, it's because God had touched my heart. And the second promise, I'd go through any door that opened up as a result of forgiving her. And it's just been amazing, the doors that have opened. That was November 2nd, 1986, over 25 years ago, and to this day I've kept those 2 promises.
Well, Paula Cooper told the Times of Northwest Indiana that she still struggles to understand what was going through her head when she murdered Ruth Pelke.
I was 15 years old, and I couldn't tell you what my mindset was at 15 as opposed to what my mindset is at 42. I really can't. For maybe 10, 15 years into my sentence, I really didn't even understand what happened. Honestly, I sat and tried to figure it all out, and for years I couldn't figure it out.
Paula Cooper was physically abused as a child. She told the Times of Northwest Indiana she wants to help troubled youth by preventing them from making her mistakes.
Mainly, I want to tell them that you don't want prison. You start off with these little crimes and you're out there selling drugs and you don't want to get a job and you want to get a felony on your record and run around and think you're cool and cute, and you don't know what prison is. You know, prison strips you of everything.
Bill Pelke, your response to the comments that Paula Cooper made, and if you could explain how you feel now with her release this week.
Well, I want to try to help Paula Cooper in any way that I can to help her release be successful. I'm very happy that she is now out of prison. For the last 2 years, I've been looking forward to this time, and I want to do whatever I can do to try to help her. I've never asked her why she committed the crime. I don't believe that there's a good answer for that.
Bill Pelke, it was your father who found the bloodied body of your grandmother, Ruth Pelke. He supported Paula Cooper's execution and told a Post-Tribune reporter in May of 1987, quote, "I believe my son is one of the so-called new breed who doesn't believe people should have to pay their debts." Did he ever change his mind, Bill?
Well, to some point, he definitely did. Also, on that same paper, there was a quote from me that said, "My grandmother died a martyr for Jesus Christ, and Christ taught forgiveness." And I just always thought, well, I like my quote better than his. But what I had learned about forgiveness at that point, it was real easy for me to forgive my father for not understanding what I was doing. But also in the same article that you were quoting from, my father did make a statement that he knew she was getting out this year, and he said he had no problem with that. He said she'd served her time according to the laws of the state of Indiana, and he was satisfied with that. My father and I, it was tense for several years, but we did have reconciliation before he died in January.
We're speaking with Bill Pelke, now an anti-death penalty advocate. In 1985, his grandmother, Ruth Pelke, murdered by 15-year-old Paula Cooper. She was convicted, sentenced to death, made her the youngest person on death row. He was among those who pleaded for her life to be spared. On Monday, Paula Cooper was released, and he has gone to Indiana to see her. Bill Pelke, you're also a close friend of our guest here in studio in New York, Sister Helen Prejean.
Hi, Bill. You're still doing the good work.
Hi, Sister Helen.
Yeah.
Now, Sister Helen, your book that is world-renowned, Dead Man Walking, made famous not only by the work itself, but by the film that was directed by Tim Robbins, starred in by Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn. Susan Sarandon played you. It's the 20th anniversary of the book. The first copy of this book has a connection to the man we're speaking with today.
It does. We were at his home in Indiana getting ready to go march on the road for a week or 2 weeks, and the box arrived from Random House, and I had never laid my eyes on the real book, and I opened up the box, and there's the book, A Dead Man Walking. I'd never written a book before. I went, Bill, this is it. We get to share this moment together. He still remembers it too, right, Bill?
Bill,
absolutely.
Do you remember that moment?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it was a great moment. There were a bunch of us gathered, and it was a real thrill to see her open that box and hold the book in her hand.
And remember, Bill, we put it in the back of the van. And remember, Bill, we put the books in the back of the van wherever we went on the road in Indiana. We'd be getting the books out and handing them out. It was the first book tour, really.
And Sister Helen, could you talk about what impact you think the book has had in the last 20 years and where the discussion has shifted on the death penalty since you first wrote it?
No, it's really important. I just stand behind my publisher, Vintage. It's very rare to republish a book, a new edition, because there's a whole new generation of readers. I didn't know the power of a book when I wrote Dead Man Walking, because, see, I'm from the South, and we do a lot of talking and storytelling. I didn't know that a book, you know, could have such power that you open it up. And when you take people on a journey in a book, like I did in Dead Man, they don't have to debate with anybody. In their imagination, they're going there intimately to the perpetrator, Patrick Saunier, the man who had killed 2 teenage kids, and then they're over on the side of the victims' families and going through their rage and their, and me thrown in the middle of it. That's the way Susan likes to talk about the film, said this nun was in over her head. She didn't know what she's doing.
Tell us the story very briefly.
Of what?
Of Patrick Sonia.
He and his brother killed 2 teenage kids. They had been hanging out near a local lover's lane, and they would take the kids, and because the kids were unprotected. And generally it led to, or often it did, to raping the girl. They claimed to be security officers. Just despicable things. But one night, with the teenage couple, with Loretta Bourque and David LeBlanc, the girl, Loretta, was raped, and they are found shot in the back of the head right near an empty sugarcane field. It was unspeakably horrible. And then, of course, first I meet Patrick and visit him on death row, and then his brother, and then when I found out the crime, that riptide inside me emotionally. And I understand the journey that people make, because you're so outraged over the death of innocent people. And then there's a part in all of us that said, well, whoever did this unspeakable act needs to pay with their own life. They shouldn't live, they're dead. And that's the journey. And that's the journey of the book, Dead Man Walking. And it's the journey of all the talks I give around the United States, and really taking people through the story and helping people navigate those waters inside of outrage on the one hand, and then on the other, recognizing that people are worth more than one terrible act of their life.
Who is Matthew Poncelet?
Matthew Poncelet is Tim Robbins' creation. He's a composite character of the first 2 people in this book that I accompanied, Patrick Sonia and Robert Lee Willie. So, as Tim explained, when you do a film, you have 2 hours, so we can't take 2 death row inmate stories, 2 families. So he put all the tough parts of Robert Willie and then the part of Patrick Sonia. He was a lot more remorseful and deeply in touch with what he had done. And he put them together in Matthew Poncelet.
Let's turn to a clip of Dead Man Walking. Here, death row prisoner Matthew Poncelet finally admits his role in the murder and rape of 2 teenagers. The clip begins with Sister Helen Prejean, played by Susan Sarandon, asking if he takes responsibility for his acts.
Do you take responsibility for both of their deaths?
Yes, ma'am. When lights dimmed on the till that night, I kneeled down by my bunk. I prayed for them kids. I never done that before.
Oh, man. There are spaces of sorrow only God can touch. You did a terrible thing, man, a terrible thing. But you have a dignity now. Nobody could take that from you. You are a son of God, Matthew Poncelet.
Death row prisoner Matthew Poncelet goes on to thank Sister Helen Prejean for her kindness.
I just hope my death can give them parents some relief. I really do.
Well, maybe it's the best things you can give to the persons in the Delacroix is a wish for their peace.
Because I never had no real love myself. Never loved a woman or anybody else myself much good. Well, figures I'd have to die to find love. Thank you for loving me.
A scene from Dead Man Walking. Sister Helen Prejean, how were those visits in prison? And of course, you've made many of them. In fact, was it at all accurate the way Susan Sarandon is reaching through the bars?
Well, absolutely. In those moments were incredible for me. I've accompanied 6 human beings to their deaths at the hands of the state. It's a fire that burns in me by witnessing that. And, you know, people have ideas in their mind of prisoners in general, people who go to prison or people on death row, that they're monsters. But that incredible human interaction, and they have touched me deeply, these human beings, because you experience their dignity. It led to a direct dialogue with Pope John Paul, where I asked him to please to shore up Catholic teaching. I said, does the Catholic Church only protect or stand for the dignity of the innocent? What about the guilty? And when I'm walking with a man who's shackled hand and foot, and he's being led to being killed in this room. And he says, "Sister, please pray God holds up my legs." I said, "Where is the dignity, Your Holiness, in this death? We need you to stand strong to help Catholics." And through the dialogue and education that's gone on over these years, in '96 when the film came out, 78% of Americans supported the death penalty and 80% of Catholics. It was a terrible statistic in the 80s. The more people went to church, the more they supported the death penalty. And in 2011, that had dropped to 63% of the American public saying on the up-down question, are you for the death penalty? And 59% of Catholics. So the dialogue's making a difference, education's, and that's why I'm so glad about this book getting out afresh.